Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Evans, Executive Director of FotoFest. And on behalf of FotoFest, it's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston and to the keynote address of the FotoFest Biennial 2026. We are deeply grateful to our partners here at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston for hosting this gathering, and to all of you for joining us for what promises to be an inspiring and thought-provoking biennial. You can find out about our vast, and I really mean that, our vast exhibitions and many, many programs by visiting photofest.org, FOTOFEST.org. I don't know what's going on up there. Since its co-founding by Wendy Watrous and Frederick Baldwin over 4 decades ago, FotoFest has brought artists, scholars, curators, and audiences from around the world to Houston with a simple but powerful belief that photography matters, not only as an artistic medium, but as a way of understanding the world and one another. Photography has always carried the power to document. Good idea. Here we go. Photography has always carried the power to document, to question, to bear witness, and sometimes to challenge the very systems through which images circulate. In moments of social and political transformation, photography becomes especially vital. It gives form to lived experience, and it creates spaces where new narratives and perspectives can emerge. This is why we are particularly honored to open the biennial with tonight's keynote speaker. Mark Seeley is one of the most influential voices working today at the intersection of photography, history, and cultural critique. As director of Autograph in London, he has spent decades advancing a curatorial practice grounded in advocacy, championing artists whose work challenges dominant histories and expands our understanding of photographic culture. Through exhibitions, including the FotoFest Biennial 2020, African Cosmologies, Photography Time and the Other, and the upcoming Hamburg Triennial, Alliance, Infinity, Love in the Face of the Other, publications, and through critical writing, he has helped reshape the international conversation about photography and its role in society. His work asks us to think deeply about how images function, about how they circulate, how they construct meaning, and how they can either reinforce or resist systems of power. Many of you will know his landmark book, Decolonizing the Camera, which has become an essential text for anyone grappling with histories and politics embedded within photographic practice. But beyond scholarship, Mark Seeley is also deeply grounded in the idea of agency, the power of artists, curators, and institutions to shape how images are seen, how they are understood, and how they are valued. Tonight's keynote, Keep on Movin', Agency and Advocacy Then and Now, invites us to reflect on how these questions continue to evolve, how artists and cultural institutions navigate the politics of representation, how photography participates in struggles for visibility and justice, and how the work of advocacy continues across generations. At a moment when images move faster and circulate more widely than ever before, these questions could not be more urgent. Seeley has spent his career helping us think more clearly and more courageously about these questions. It is truly a privilege to welcome him to Houston and to the FotoFest Biennial, and please join me in welcoming Mark Seeley.
I think you should have just left you up there, Stephen, carrying on. I was beginning to enjoy it rather than dread the idea of speaking in public. And I'm super pleased to see Wendy here tonight, just arrived, so that's fantastic. We were delayed a little bit. Brilliant. So just a little kind of format thing. I'm gonna read some and then interject a little bit, and there's a slideshow here which will just run you through, I guess, a little period of time, best part of 40 years of working in different with different artists, different projects, different sensitivities, different abilities, which just gives you a bit of the kind of genealogy, DNA of some of the projects that I've been involved in over the years, and some of the people and some of the ideas that we've been speaking about at Autograph and with colleagues, as I say, over the past, which will be in 2028, 40 years of the agency's existence. So I'm going to tell a story tonight. I didn't really want to do a lecture. I thought it would be nice to see it through the idea of celebrating FotoFest and the way that conversations kind of happen. So Keep On Moving, agency, advocacy, then and now. Keep On Moving is from a song from 1989, which was a landmark popular song which kind of got London moving and jiving along by a band called Soul to Soul. It's a huge, influential, and if you can watch their video, you can imagine a kind of multicultural, dreaming, new society emerging among confident, culturally diverse young people in the city. And being 29 at the time, I was imagining that would be a place that I could dance to. So those of you that know some of my work, you know that music, something that Stephen and I share. Music is kind of quite foundational to my thinking. It's probably the only place of solace that I really do get. The idea of listening for me is a kind of like radical and transgressive space which enables me to dream. It's important that we keep those ideas of dreaming otherness alive. So FotoFest Houston, March 1992, marked a decisive moment in the public recognition of an artist, Rotimi Fani-Kayode, and his photographic works. Just over 2 years after his tragic death, his untimely death in December 1989, his sumptuous, transgressive, and seductive color photographs were shown publicly for the first time at this international festival. So we're imagining London post the riots, very difficult times, and here we have an artist who's passed away, foundational to Autograph setting up. Our first chair is being shown at this international festival. For us, that was part of dreaming. The inclusive nature of Fani-Kayode's presence was not an old act of colonial unveiling and benevolence, a discovery. So much of the work of black practitioners has been through the lens of discovery. I don't want to be discovered anymore. It was a critical intervention through and into the conjunctures of black cultural politics and the global AIDS crisis, and a direct challenge to the stale, conservative, Thatcherite and Reaganite politics of the time. This radical intervention situated Fani-Kayode's practice within a worldwide photographic conversation that had until then largely excluded such voices. So here you have a majority world, black practitioners, institutions largely excluding their voices. Wendy and Fred from FotoFest had visited the UK in 1991 as they were making connections and researching photographers for the forthcoming edition of the still young festival. This festival was very young in 1991. Through creative dialogue with the editors of 10/8 magazine in Birmingham, a significant outcome emerged: the invitation to present an exhibition in Houston dedicated to black British photographic practitioners. Again, a kind of dream. The offer of this exhibition opportunity, given the historic lack of attention paid to these photographers, was indeed for us in London a landmark event. Titled Inside Out, Black British Photographers, the exhibition brought together the works of artists such as Ingrid Pollard, Claudette Holmes, David A. Bailey, and of course, Rotimi Fani-Kayode. Ingrid Pollard, as you know, has gone on to become a hugely successful artist, Tate nominations, and picked up the Hasselblad Prize just two years ago. David A. Bailey has gone on to curate amazing shows at Tate and globally recognized for his significant work around missing chapters of black historical arts. And of course, Rotimi Fani-Kayode now has been celebrated for his work and purchased by many museums around the country. So this was quite a radical and early recognition of the potency and power of their work. An additional exhibition of Black British photographers was shown at the Barnes Blackburn Galleries in Houston's Third Ward. This organization was founded in 1983 and in another way resonated with many of the things we wanted to do at Autograph. It was founded by the artist and activist Michelle Barnes. It served as a vibrant community-led cultural space that promoted Black creative agency at a time when Black subjectivities remained marginalized and precarious. The exhibition at the Barnes Blackburn Galleries was based upon the forthcoming issue of 10/8 magazine called Critical Decade. We were looking back, actually, at how critical that decade was across the 80s. Black British photography in the 80s will be published to coincide with this festival in 1992. So, the imposing George R. Brown Convention Center in downtown Houston was the central location for the biennial's principal curatorial program, which aimed to foster dialogue among photographers working across Europe and Latin America. Many of the exhibitions, drawing on historical archives and contemporary voices, presented works new to US audiences. For Inside Out, Fred and Wendy invited Alex Hurst to present the photographs he and Fani-Kayode, his partner, had been developing just before Kayode's death. The intimacy of their relationship had shaped this body of work as it shared intellectual and visual inquiry into different cultural and artistic knowledge formations. Their collaboration in life, as in photography, represented an expansive, cross-fertilized investigation into art history, sexual desire, Yoruba spirituality, and hybrid identities. In the context of their relationship, blackness was not just part of an epidermal schema of life, it was a state of consciousness, both political and cultural. Though at the time, financial resources at Autograph were extremely limited, I decided that as director of Autograph at the time was me, a table, and a telephone. So grand title, little resources. I decided that as director, it was important to attend events such as FotoFest. During the biennial, Hurst and I stayed at the same hotel. Very rarely had we had the opportunity to spend quality time together. And talking with him long into the warm evenings in the hotel garden was both transformative and informative. Being able to spend quality time together to discuss his relationship with Fani-Kayode was easier in Houston. The distance from home in this instance created space for dialogue. At that point, Hurst knew he was unwell, and our conversations concerning care, legacy, and responsibility were difficult and honest. It was in Houston that Hurst entrusted me with their archives. Fani-Kayode's large-scale, color-saturated photographs were sensual, ceremonially charged, and dense with hybrid signs uniquely and radically drawn from queer subjectivities and Yoruba cosmologies. They symbolize the bold new frontier in the field of representational politics. Installed within proximity to Fani-Kayode's works were the photographs of the Brazilian photographer Mario Cravanetto. The quality and compositional makeup of Cravanetto's work, black and white photographs, resonated exquisitely with Fani-Kayode's Rubenesque sensibilities. Both artists' work were deeply informed by Candomblé and Yoruba spiritualities. At FotoFest 1992, the spiritual dialogue was laid bare in brilliant curatorial photographic synchronicity. It was an inspiring and compelling example of the diasporic Afro-Atlantic cultural worlds at work in contemporary culture, oceans apart, but fundamentally and spiritually connected through West African cultural legacies and diasporas. So in 1992, it was early in my curatorial career, and witnessing the proximity of Fani-Kayode's work and Mario Cravanetto's work, while recognizing the personal, cultural, and political circumstances of their different lives, was transformative. I was charged by the example of this black consciousness and black epistemologies that were engaged with practices beyond the making of race, or the geographical nature of thinking beyond being and place. Together, Fani-Kayode and Cravanetto's works generated a striking force that explored sexual desire, sexuality, desire, West African diasporic hybridities, syncretism, and other forms and ways of being. Both their bodies of work, when read as encounters, can be best understood as voices emerging from cultural atmospheres shaped by West African cosmologies. As artists, both Cravanetto and Fani-Kayode resisted historical forms of oppression and, by extension, refused any singular or fixed readings of their photography. No essentialisms throughout their practice. These types of photographic convergencies lie at the core of Fred and Wendy's thinking, I believe. It was clear that FotoFest's practice was a form of actual praxis that functioned to disrupt the canon and push back against the orthodoxies of photographic history. The dialogue between Fani-Kayode and Cravanetto's works was a curatorial decision that was part of Fred and Wendy's part, and it functioned as a curatorial catalyst for my thinking in the future. What occurred was then a rare moment of delinking photography from its dominant Eurocentric arrogance. FotoFest 1992, for me, flipped the narrative. The traditional history of photography, with its narrow frames of reference, could no longer sustain its claims to universality. Photography at the juncture of Fani-Kayode, Yoruba, Brazilian, refugee, queer, and Cravanetto, Brazilian, Italian, both influenced by Yoruba cultures, became a portal for the pluriverse of photography, which in many instances had been hiding in plain sight. The positionality of Fani-Kayode and Cravanetto in this exhibition was an occasion when photography's missing chapters, suppressed narratives, unheard voices, spectorial hauntologies asserted their presence with urgency and clarity. So FotoFest 92 made visible the fact that photography's other histories could no longer be marginalized or deferred. What was at stake then, and remains so now, is the ethical, cultural, and intellectual necessity of diversity and inclusion, not as occasional institutional patronage, but as a critical condition for the survival and relevance of the medium itself. Without a sustained commitment to plural histories, diasporic knowledge, and marginalized practices, photography risks reproducing the very exclusions that have long constrained its imaginative and cultural capacity to bridge difference. Houston FotoFest 1992 stands as a reminder that inclusion is not an addendum to the history of photography, but rather a reconfiguration and rewriting of its geopolitics. Part 2. On the bus. Encounter, exchange, and generosity. So, imagine then the world of photography as an endless journey, winding through shifting landscapes, different temporalities, contrasting cities and communities. The route is uncharted, and the passengers are artists, curators, organizers, who are forever changing their seats whoever changing their seats, each boarding and getting off with their own stories, hopes, and visions. At specific stops, new companions join, conversations spark, and the bus is filled with an infinite sense of possibility. Risk and not knowing are the spirits that have animated the ongoing relationship between FotoFest and my directorship at Autograph in London, a journey defined by encounter, exchange, and acts of generosity. The experience of being welcomed at FotoFest was and is both an affirmative and an affirmation and a license to exist. In the UK, in the early days of Autograph, the agency, maybe it still is, was often seen as a radical outlier, an irritant from the margins, disrupting the status quo while trapped among the scraps of public sector funding, gasping for air. But in Houston, among peers who valued the openness of curiosity, the Autograph mission was embraced and celebrated. Through FotoFest, opportunities opened. Christopher Rauschenberg's Blue Sky, Oregon Center for Photographic Arts, located in Portland, was just one example of being able to show the work of artists such as Eric Lasdima, a young black French-British artist at Blue Sky in 1998. Was a direct outcome of conversations with Chris during FotoFest. Those conversations were absolutely essential. And Chris is here tonight, and over the years, I think those small times we spent together in the corridors across the table have really resonated and been appreciated in London. Thank you, Christopher, for the support and the support you've given this festival over many years. These encounters were reciprocal. FotoFest gained, I believe, from Autograph's perspective, just as Autograph gained from FotoFest's reach. The FotoFest meeting place, bus, in this sense, is never a one-way journey. Passengers become drivers, and drivers become passengers, shaping the collective direction, and importantly, no seats are reserved for passengers of a particular class, race, or sexuality. Vital to this journey is the distinction between discovery and encounter. Discovery carries the baggage of colonialism, the presumption that one side has the right to claim, define, and consume. Encounter, by contrast, is mutual. On the FotoFest bus, agency shifts as stories are shared, friendships forged, and boundaries are crossed. FotoFest and Autograph have insisted on encounter as an organizing principle, focusing on dialogue, listening, and humility, being open to learning and allowing the feeling of being fully present in the company of strangers are the essence of this festival. Fully present in the company of strangers. The legacy of these journeys is complex to anchor. It's not possible to pinpoint all the points of connection, all the departures or arrivals along the journeys FotoFest have fostered. On one such occasion, by spending time alongside Susan Mysalis, who's also here tonight, a well-known photographer and curator of Kurdistan in the shadow of history, I came to a deeper understanding of the nature of imperial violence and contemporary cultural erasure. We met on the day Susan was departing from FotoFest and I was arriving. That brief encounter would spur decades of friendship. Kurdistan in the shadow of history also helped shape the work I knew we had to do at Autograph. Beyond presenting exhibitions, collection, preservation, and conservation were going to be essential. In a similar vein, I learned more about New York City through the photographic work of Arlene Gottfried than any other American photographer. The experience also of talking with Didier Ben-Lulu about his work in the old city of Jerusalem was likewise illuminating. Through participation in FotoFest Meeting Place portfolio reviews, I learned how humbling it is to be a curator, and that those who are brave enough to share their work with strangers across a small table for 20 minutes are, in many ways, the vital organs of photography. It energizes the forgotten ones and challenges the smug. Through these forms of intervention, the cultural gates to the creative industries are kept open, and the practitioners are seen as equal on the journey to agency, are a rare asset. In this way, the bus is not an elite luxury coach, it is a form of public commons. So both FotoFest and Autograph have weathered political shifts, financial challenges, and changing cultural tides. Yet by holding fast to these core values of openness, solidarity, alliance, and infinity, to love and kindness, to the belief in photography as an act of generosity and human connectivity, both organizations have continued to move forward, amplifying new generations and championing what I would call liberatory lenses. Those liberatory lenses fully emerged in 2020 after I was invited in late 2018 to create the 18th edition of the FotoFest Biennial. Stephen Evans, who you've met tonight, thank you, Stephen. Stephen Evans, the artistic director for the up-and-coming biennial, had visited Autograph shortly after his appointment as executive director of FotoFest in 2014. Evans had a long history of working with and supporting artists outside of the mainstream and was familiar with the work Autograph had been doing internationally, especially the work we've been doing outside of Europe and North America. Now, through FotoFest, he wanted to bring this work to Houston. We agreed that the focus was to be on contemporary photographers connected to Africa, to the African continent, not just as a place, but radically as a cosmology, an idea, a foundational place of being. What was offered as a provocation was that Africa is beyond borders. The continent's cultural influence, northward, southward, eastward, westward, would be presented as a vast photographic dynamic, a state of consciousness, a form of jazz that would be shared across the platforms of FotoFest. The 2020 biennial's underlying empirical driver was that Africa is indeed everywhere. We resisted the idea of going on expensive flights and travel and hunting down and bringing back photographers by visiting studios. Africa was everywhere. At the core of the 18th edition of the FotoFest was a sense of return, of a going full circle. Through the title of the biennial's exhibition, African Cosmologies, Photography, Time and the Other, I wanted to encourage the audience to think beyond geography and to imagine the creative energies of African cultures as spiritual encounters that are globally atmospheric. It's kind of like an air, and always present. The first artist on the list to be exhibited was, of course, Rotimi Fani-Kayode. But this time, his voice was presented in concert with many of the radical diasporic voices whom he had influenced and continues to influence, including the now celebrated artists such as Lyle Ashton Harris, Zanele Muhuli, and Eric Gayamfi. So since its inception, FotoFest has been dedicated to advancing our understanding of the medium and its different histories. Our collaboration for the 18th edition was to build on that mission and to celebrate our shared values, which have continued beyond 2020, beyond the 2020 exhibition, to the production and co-curated projects, including the installation of emerging artists such as C. Rose Smith's work for the 2024 biennial. Evans's proposal to feature Smith's work at the FotoFest led to a hugely successful exhibition co-production, followed by the show will be produced in Autograph for late 2024. So, the bus keeps moving through time and space, and the manifold dialects The manifold dialogues aboard continue across years, oceans, and continents. Each stop brings new opportunities and challenges for encounter, transformation, growth, and greater connectivity. It's vital then that our collective curatorial work remains committed to sustaining these transnational conversations and championing photographers who challenge old hegemonies. Only through these photographic encounters can we continue to function as a critical force through which to share and learn, enabling us to create space for kindness and acts of generosity in what John and Alice Coltrane might describe as a space or a love supreme. Thank you. But I also need to just personally, while we're here, and publicly thank Wendy really for her generosity and Fred over the many years, because it's really important how we think about institutions and the spaces that we occupy. But we have to remember that it's individuals in those spaces that make those decisions. People talk about institutions as if somehow they're difficult to change. They're not difficult to change. It's the people that are running those institutions that make change happen. So, rare gems arrive occasionally, and visionary thinkers emerge. And we are fortunate enough in Houston in this time to have Wendy with us. And her vision and her light has enabled so much to happen, it's impossible to capture that in just one small lecture. So from the deep depths of my heart, Wendy, I will simply say 2 words. Thank you. Okay. You Q&As? I don't know whether, I think we've got a little time for a few Q&As. Wendy. Thank you. Pleasure. So we got time for a bit of Q&A. I don't think we have a roving mic, but if anybody's got a burning moment, then we can try and address it. No?
They're getting one.
Oh.
Think about your question.
Unless you've got a really loud voice.
Okay. Show me your hands if you want to ask Mark a question. Coming. Is that Allison? I'm behind you. Pardon me.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. I am watching the demise of a number of photo exceptionalist institutions, graduate programs, museums, festivals, and they are being absorbed into some kind of larger visual culture, or not. And I know we're seeing it in the UK as well. And I'd love to hear you talk about that. I mean, it seems like things took off around 1972, and that arc is going in the other direction now. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, there's a lot to say about that. It depends, again. I mean, I think I could, on the one hand, I could say the medium's in an incredibly, and I think we're at a kind of crossroads, a real proper conjuncture, a real proper space of where it might imagine itself to be. Part of that, which I don't want to really go into tonight, is the space of artificial intelligence. Part of that is to do with access to it. Part of it is the way that it's actually been framed and recognized within cultural institutions itself. Part of it is its absorption into the museum space, which means it becomes a different kind of animal, a different kind of language begins to happen. Part of it is also that it's now highly collectible, that I would argue that its democracy has become something else. People want different things when they take up the practice. Part of that means that, there's an ongoing shift within where it will surface and the meanings that it has. It's almost become rogue, you could argue. That's maybe good, that's maybe bad. It means that people can curate with it and do things on different platforms, whether they're, as we say, digital or accessible. Printing techniques, the whole thing has become highly, highly fractured. But I do think we are genuinely at a new place right in this instant about what kind of decisions we want to make around photography. There will be something else that happens, I do believe, within the next 2 or 3 years that marks the time that we're in and backwards, and also marks the time that we're in going forwards. It's almost like a kind of new copyright space, that things will be coded differently. Authenticity will be, built within the DNA of understanding what's changed, what's not. This idea of falseness and truth is simply unsustainable. It's not going to work. It will just become a kind of characterization of the medium. But something I do believe will surface that means that photography will continue to become incredibly relevant and important to our lives. How the institutions respond, I'm looking for institutions to lead that sense of where we are. I'm looking for government cultural ministers to kind of lay claim to the idea that something has to happen around the field of representation that enables us to have trust back into that space. So that's the thinking. There's a hand.
You acknowledged individual tonight, and you talk about institutions. And I'm wondering how that, in the day and age we're living in, how that works for you. The reality of the individual who stand with the integrity to do the art, acknowledge the work, and the institutions that are growing and being conveyors of art.
Okay. I might not answer the question in the way that in the way that is satisfactory, but I think individuals and institutions again are in very precarious positionalities. They're scared, frightened, traumatized by the politics of our time. They're caught within toxic arguments where people are increasingly polarized. There's a fear, a genuine anxiety about what can and can't be said. There's a sense, in my view, of a growing conservative narrative around global politics or people or the way that we can be amongst each other, the way that we can either have empathy or understanding. I think institutions in many ways have to bear the responsibility of caring for those very difficult spaces or conversations that happen, And by conversations, I mean the things that people make, the things that people want to take, the things that people want to preserve. I demand now a space where we should be able to speak and make mistakes. We should be free to be able to articulate exactly what we want. But at the same time, we need to listen, okay? I think we need to understand that there are points in conversations, like a conversation can't just be a rant or a space of being. And I think our institutions need to start thinking about how do we create spaces for different ways of listening. And I think at that point, individuals become hugely empowered. But, but, you know, when you do that in isolation, when you stand up, right, you really find, you know, it's difficult, you know, speaking about race, politics, gender, class, the marginalized, the hurt in the world, the disenfranchised. It's really interesting just how many friends you don't have in that conversation. It's interesting, that one, right? So when I talk about alliance, infinity, and love, as a project we're working in Hamburg, which opens in June next year as part of the triennial there, it's a series, hopefully, of conversations that enable people not to go, look at the spectacle of this photography world, look at its magic, look what it can do, look at its wonderful observational qualities. I'm asking people to stand in front of things, some difficult things, and ask themselves, why is that difficult for me? Why? And accept the fact that these others exist in the world and that it's our job, fundamentally, to take responsibility for those others. Because if we don't do that work, if I don't take responsibility for you, you and you, first and foremost, before I take any form of responsibility for myself, then we are doomed. I must learn to care for you first in an ethical and responsible way. And that's the photography of the future that I'm looking to support. Are we done? Oh, no. Go. There's a mic coming, actually. Share it. Wait, it's coming.
I was just reflecting on a friend who was able, during his work day, his work mission, to step back with
There you go.
I was reflecting on a friend who, in the course of his workday and his work mission, was able to step back with very standard equipment and consumer tools and make a very touching photo book about his work mission. And that these days can happen everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it makes me personally very optimistic about the future of photography because I don't believe it's ever been as democratic as it is now. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. But democracy's a funny word, actually. it's you know, we have. I mean, democracies are, you know, they need to be defended and they need to be really examined, too. I sometimes think, you know, just because everybody has access to something, it might not necessarily be a good thing. Healthcare, I would say yes. But what some people do with the camera is pretty ridiculous, to be honest. But there you go. No. I'm not gonna go into a totalitarian space, not for sure. But I think it's, you know, I'm just questioning. This is what I mean by about, with all due respect, what I mean about having, you know, when you have something in your hand, and you're gonna have, you know, the possibility to point that thing at something else, then I'm asking you to think really carefully in the future about what you do with that, how you circulate it. That's where the responsibility question comes in, right? If you want to do what you want to do with it and share it within your own space, but as soon as you put it into the commons, as soon as you put it into the world, then you have a different kind of responsibility. And we have seen centuries of stuff which dehumanizes all kinds of people. And what I'm basically saying is like, enough already, right? So I can do all that stuff, and I can live with it, and I can be with it. But if we want to change where we are in this present, then it's our job to start circulating different types of ways that, as I say, bring us closer together. Otherwise, we're just going to be in the same old groove. Maybe one more, and then we must be done. Good. Well, can I just thank you all for turning out and turning out tonight. It's been a real pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Again, check the website for our programs. We have our unfiltered open portfolio night coming up at the Hilton Houston Post Oak by the Galleria Saturday night at 7 p.m. And then before that, in the same location at 5:30, we have a panel about artist photo books, and you're welcome to come to that too. So please take advantage of everything going on. There's much, much more. Thanks again.